Hello there again. Hello, everybody, and hello if you're watching on recording as well. So today's session actually follows on from our last webinar where we looked at the sources for historical research on gardens. And however tempting it is to introduce yourself to your chosen landscapes owner at the first opportunity and arrange a date, it is going to be a much more fruitful site visit if you have found out as much as you can before you arrive. You will already have a good idea of what you might find. You will have worked out a plan of action for the day itself and have an impressive folder of information and images so that it looks more professional when you meet the owner or the manager. Okay. That's right, my screen is refusing to move at the moment. Right, now behave itself. So this is a summary of what I'm going to be covering today. Why is it necessary to visit and how do you go about gaining access? We'll have a quick look at the recording form and what other pieces of equipment and documents that you need to gather together before your visit. How do we go about conducting a site visit so that you come away with all the information that you need? And what support is there for you as you conduct your research and your visit? So although you can gather huge amounts of crucial information about your chosen landscape from archival and desktop research, often it only starts to make complete sense when you visit and you walk around your site. Even if you're really familiar with that landscape and have visited many times before, you will see it with new eyes when comparing it to old maps and images and other historic materials that you've been collecting. So what is it that we want to achieve from a site visit? Well, we want to understand the history and development of the landscape by comparing what can be seen on the ground now to what we know from the archives, maps, and reports that we've been looking at during our research. We want to record what the site looks like today and make a note of its condition. We're not writing condition surveys for this project, but you can make a note of whether something is ruined, or it's not maintained, or it has been recently restored, vandalized, or even completely disappeared. And your visit, it helps us think about which elements contribute most to that landscape's significance. For example, what features really stand out and make it special. So these are the main things you should focus on during your visit. Your research will have thrown up features such as ponds, moats, bridges, summer houses, ha-has, lawns, belts of trees, kitchen gardens, terraces, and many other garden features. And during your research, you will have made note of any of these on your recording form. And your visit will enable you to assess whether they are still there or not. Your visit may throw up features which have not been documented or included on maps. The map surveyors might have missed features, not considered them important enough to be included, or features could post-date the documents and maps that you've been studying. More recent features can be acknowledged and given an approximate date of construction. If you're lucky enough to meet the owners or residents, do ask if they have anything that would be of interest to see. Plans, state documents, and pictures are often still in their original house and languish in cupboards or estate offices or hang on backroom walls. You might be lucky and they may allow you to see these and photograph them. Look for planned views. Usually there is an important view from the main reception room windows of the house. So if you stand with your back to those, you should pick up which views were designed to be most important. But there might be others that you'll discover as you walk around the landscape. There might be a view back to the main house through some trees, or there could be another view across a park towards a building or a garden feature. Finally, your visit will be a great way to determine the aspect of your park or garden. Is it on the south side or the west side of a hill? Does the garden reflect the underlying geology and contours of the land? And the area outside the perimeter of your property, is it an edge of a wood? Is it bordered by modern development or a busy road? Or is it cultivated farmland? All of these categories combine to form the landscape's setting. If your site is open to the public, for example, it's a public park, a cemetery, or another designed landscape which is freely accessible, you theoretically don't need to get permission to walk around taking notes and photos. But you might get some funny looks if you're spotted. So it is a good idea to let the owner or the manager know in advance what you want to do, which day, and the reasons why. However, it is essential to ask for permission if the landscape is privately owned, even if it's one that you can pay to visit regularly. If you can find the contact details for the person in charge, we can provide this standard letter for you to send to them, explaining what the project is trying to achieve and asking for permission to visit. This can be emailed to them. Sometimes a paper letter with your contact email and phone number can produce better results. Sometimes you need to do both. You may find that the site owner or manager is really interested in what you're doing and has some historic information or anecdotes that you could use. If so, it is definitely worth making contact. It is wise to do this fairly early, as it may take a while to get a response. And sadly, we may have some landscape owners or managers who do not reply to your request, or they do reply saying no. If this is the case with your landscape, you can record as much of it as you can see from public roads and footpaths, aerial photographs, and Google Earth. But please do not be tempted to trespass, however tempting it is to see up a track and round a bend of the trees to something you think might be there. Okay, so this is the first sight you've probably had of the recording form. And we've filled it all in with lots of information, but obviously we'll be sending out blank copies of this on the right. The first page of the recording form is ideally, sorry, let me start again. So this is the first page of the recording form. We filled it in with examples of what's needed in each section. Ideally, the majority of the first section and the next two sections will be filled in before you go on your visit. You can take paper copies with you, or you can use a digital copy on a tablet or a laptop, weather permitting. For those of you that are coming to the meetup at the Food Museum next Tuesday, we will be looking at this form and taking it around with us when we tour the site. So depending on the size of your screen that you're watching on today, you may or may not be able to make out most of the headings and the entries here. But basically, the first section deals with which site it is, where it is, who is filling in this form, and then identifying any historical listed structures, conservation areas, etc., that are already on Historic England's National Historic Environment Register, or the County Historic Environment Records that we call the HERs. Our finished reports are going to be deposited with the county's HERs, and if any of you aren't familiar with them, they are an important starting point for anyone interested in archaeology, built heritage, and history of an area. They provide information on a wide variety of buildings and sites, from finds of prehistoric tools to medieval castles, battlefields, Second World War pillboxes, and historic parks and gardens. And at the weekend, I saw a concrete urinal that's grade 2 listed. I don't think you'll find one of those in your gardens. They are a primary source of information for researchers, planners, and land managers. Your reports will go into the HER's Grey Literature Library, which is a collection of unpublished reports that the public can request to view. We would also like the reports to be added to local lists. These are sometimes called local heritage lists, and at the moment, not all planning authority areas have them, but where they do exist, they play an important role in identifying non-designated heritage assets and celebrating and reinforcing a sense of local character and distinctiveness. So local lists can be used to recognise what communities value about their places and ensure that this is considered as part of the planning process. And a third place your reports can be added to are the websites of the appropriate County Gardens Trust. So we've got lots of intended repositories for these documents. The landscape summary, description, and statement of significance are on the first section of the form, but are probably the last boxes that you will fill in when you have completed all your research and visits. So don't worry about them for now. And this may be an excellent exercise to undertake with your research buddy or someone else from your group in the future, because you can discuss your collective thoughts about what makes a site special. We'll be touching more about statements of significance later in the autumn, so don't worry about that for now. The end of the section 1 covers the owners and the site manager's information. So the Gardens Trust and the HERs and Historic England have up-to-date contact details, as well as documenting who you have met or had contact with. Any information not covered by the owner or main contact boxes can be added into that last box at the bottom. As it says, be careful what is written here, as it will go into a publicly accessible database. But information that might be included could be something like the main house is divided into a number of apartments, each having their own section of the gardens. Or it could be that you'd need to record that you were not given permission to access the site and had no response from the people that you did contact. Section 2 allows you to write very brief notes on the history of the landscape. So who were the key people who owned it, commissioned it, or designed it, if this is known? Has there been any notable events or activities associated with the site? Is it a good enough example to have influenced fashions in gardens and landscapes? Or could it have completely inspired the building of another landscape? Are there archives in public or private hands which document the landscape and its history? Under major changes, describe any large changes in garden style, or has it suffered from modern development, or has it been carved up between different owners? The last box in section 2 allows you to list the main sources of your information that you have used to allow someone else to find them in the future. So this, again, is a timely reminder to be very methodical in making note of where you find information, including any archive reference numbers, website addresses, and the date that you looked at material when you're doing your research. So this is a really good habit, to get into. I also write the source and reference numbers down in my notebooks, even if it hasn't contained anything of interest to you, because it is a reminder that you have looked at that particular source and you don't need to view it again. Obviously, that wouldn't have to go on this form. That's just something that I would do as standard. So section 3 will record details of your site visit, when you went, who you met, and any activities or development that threatens the preservation of the site. And here, of course, if you're on the Green Futures project, you could include here which of the energy schemes being proposed could affect this landscape. As you go round, do you notice anything which may potentially affect its preservation? Has there been unsympathetic recent buildings inside the site, or features which haven't been maintained or are in danger of collapse or removal? If you haven't been able to check whether the landscape has been part of any stewardship schemes using the Magic website, before your visit, remember to ask the owner or the manager about this. Maybe they have chosen or been required to put together a conservation management plan, which we call a CMP. They possibly might be happy to share it with you if they have, and CMPs often they should contain quite a bit of historical information. If not, there is a chance that the plans have been lodged at the Parks and Gardens UK database. Now, I mentioned this in my last webinar, and since then, I have heard that this database is now temporarily unavailable to view online. So that is not going to be possible, but there's hope that it will be back somewhere in the future. Lastly, in section 3, were there any constraints on your visit? For example, were there areas that you were not allowed to enter? Or did adverse weather conditions make your survey difficult? Hopefully, if this was the latter, you felt able to arrange another visit with the owner or the manager for another day. Section 4 is the part that refers to your site visit, and it would be a good idea to take this page with you, or a copy of this page with you, as a checklist on the day. I would take a paper copy, which has all the features and information I have found in my research noted down, and then I might take a second copy or a digital version of it to add information that I find on during a site visit. You can see that we want to collect information about all the design elements of the landscape, from the buildings, the paths, the boundaries, water features, plan views, planted up beds, trees, woodland, as well as anything archaeological which may predate the site. We also want to know how the site is divided up, and you could name these areas and mark them on your map in advance. We want to know, how did people access the landscape in the past? And are the main and secondary entrances, and if they're still there, have they changed over time? How were people meant to move around the landscape, and have these routes remained or have they been altered? Where were people supposed to stop and admire the view? Are these views still possible, or has tree planting or self-seeded trees or built-in development obstructed these views? Landscapes are not static, so we also want to work out what has changed since the original design was laid out. Have lakes or ponds been filled in or changed in size and shape, for example? Are there specimen trees? If so, you may have already found those that are really old or special enough to feature on the Woodlands Trust inventory. You can see the link on the table there. Are the avenues or clumps of trees seen on the early maps still evident in the landscape today? Do the clipped hedges look old enough to be contemporary with the garden's conception, or are they more recent plantings? Make a note of garden buildings, follies, and any noteworthy statues. Some may be listed structures in their own right. Others may be listed on the HER inventory. Pleasure grounds are usually to one side of the main house and consist of pathways, shrubberies, specimen trees, and are quite often they are bounded by a ha-ha or an invisible ditch. Pleasure grounds were designed for easy, short distance walks and to show off the owner's latest plant acquisitions. Is the parkland beyond the ha-ha or the fence purely grass pasture, or does it contain parkland trees? Often designs are purposely created to give a view to objects outside of the owner's landscape. For example, a view towards a church or a windmill or a wooded hill or sometimes even the sea. Is there a kitchen garden? Is it walled or screened with trees? Is its layout the same as seen on the early maps and plans? Are there glass houses extant? Are there potting sheds, boiler houses, orchards, or dipping pools in the walled garden? The two boxes for modern features and boundaries are self-explanatory, and the final box is for anything you think is not being covered for above. So thinking of some of the landscapes I know are being researched, I could think of something like a garden railway or a small menagerie of animals, for example. The last section of this form refers to any attachments that you'll be submitting with the main form. These should include at least one map and hand-drawn plans and other images, photographs, maybe drone imagery, but that comes with a lot of rules and regulations. So if you know somebody with a drone, please don't just allow them to send them up without permission. But they can be very useful, but you don't have to include these, obviously. Finally, if there are any sensitive areas or features that the owner is not happy with Joe Public being able to see, these must be listed here and not included in any final reports that are published online. All the sections in the form should be filled in as concisely as possible. You can use bullet points if you prefer, and you definitely don't need to worry about producing long pieces of flowery prose. So these are the things that we suggest you do before you go out on site visits. Make a simple timeline for your house and landscape so that you are familiar with its key dates, the major building projects that happened, the people involved with their dates, and keep all this and keep your larger research folder in the car to refer to if necessary, but out of the weather. But just have with you perhaps one sheet of A4. I've done one for next week for the Abbots Hall, so you can see an example then. As previously mentioned, it is important to keep good records of your source materials so you can tell the owners where you found out information, and importantly, so you can include these on your form. Also, write a list of the things that you hope to find on site based on the research that you've already done. That way, you'll not forget any of them once you're there. These might be significant trees, avenues, statues, garden buildings, ponds, etc. in the past, but if they're now ruined or buried in undergrowth, they might be quite hard to find. It is advantageous that you're visiting your site in the winter, as the lower vegetation makes it easier to spot features both above the ground and buried lumps and bumps beneath it. Vistas and views are also much more evident when the trees are not in leaf. So, what do you need to bring? Well, the first major thing you need is a larger scale map as you can find, like this one I've got up here of Abbots Hall. Put this on a clipboard and also bring a large clear plastic bag to put over it in case it starts to rain. So as I said, print this out as large as you can. If you only have access to an A4 printer, blow it up and print it out on several pieces of paper and then join them together. This is a screenshot, as I said, of Abbott's Hall. We're meeting next week. It's quite a small site. So actually, for this one, I didn't need to blow it up and put it on more than one sheet. The printouts, take along printouts of any other key maps and images that you might want to check against the landscape. So can you match a view today with an 18th century painting of the site? Does the background in the photograph of a family posed in their garden tie up with a photo taken from the same spot today? Does a earlier hand-drawn plan explain some of the earthworks seen on your visit? So if you take them with you, you can kind of work out where the view is that they've been painted or the photo's been taken. Do take a notebook for writing down longer descriptions and maybe sketching images or making sketch plans. Take a list of things you're looking for and the recording form. A long tape measure. Now, if you're particularly interested in trying to work out the age of some old trees or measuring the size of foundations of a lost building, this could be very useful. This tape here, I bought off a well-known online auction site for £7, but you don't have to buy one. For larger features, you could practice your 1 metre strides for a rough estimate of the size. Now, this is an obvious point, but do dress for the weather and the terrain regarding footwear. Fingerless gloves are really useful so that you can write in the cold. And also, you should wear a hard hat if you intend to explore old crumbling buildings, if they appear safe to go inside. Please don't feel you have to go inside them, and please don't feel you have to buy a hard hat. You can just make your observations of the structures from outside. That will be fine. But it's very tempting to go and have a look inside, as I know. Take along a research buddy. Now, it may be that you're researching your site with somebody else, so that's an obvious choice. But we would recommend going in pairs or maybe threes, because having more than one pair of eyes is a bonus for not only spotting things, but to discuss what you're finding and for safety in case you end up in a lake or trip and fall. This buddy could be, another Green Futures volunteer, or if you decide to take someone else with you, a partner or a friend, please can you let us know who they are, because as they will have to be part of the project in order to be covered by our insurance when you're out on site. So if you are going to take somebody who's not currently in the project, can you drop Frankie an email with their name and the date of the visit that you're going to make? And then lastly, most importantly, don't forget to take drinks and some snacks to keep you going. So how do you go about recording each area? Really, it's whatever way works best for you, and you'll probably develop your own methods pretty quickly. However, these are our suggestions. I would first walk right around the landscape, not too slowly, just walk right around it, studying it well, getting a really good feel for the lie of the land, and then splitting it into different areas on your map, particularly if it's a large site. Then have a more in-depth look at each area in turn. Don't try and record the whole landscape in one, unless it is very small. Label each feature with a letter on your map, and then you can write details about it in your notebook underneath the letter you've assigned it. If you could include a grid reference or a GPS code as well, that would be brilliant. And there are apps you can have on your phone for this, but don't worry about it if you can't. This would be useful if you found something not shown on a map, but then you can try and plot the position as close as possible with a dot or a line drawing if it's a large feature like an earthwork on the map on your Flipboard. If you're looking at a very large landscape, divide it into character areas. For example, West Park or pleasure gardens, woodland, kitchen garden. Check with the owner because they may already use particular names for each area and it would make sense to use those. People can get a bit annoyed if you start referring to a part of their park, for example, and they have another name for it because obviously it is theirs, so use their terminology. Try and walk as much of the site as you can and don't just stick to the paths. If you venture out into the parkland, woodland or scrub, you may find the remains of all sorts of interesting garden structures, planting or old routeways or archaeology not visible from paths and drives. But do be safe and ask the owner beforehand if there are any particular dangers you need to be aware of. So I thought you'd like to see an example of a recording from a previous project, and this left photograph here shows the foundations of a garden chapel known as the Priory, and the middle photo shows a standing arch. Both were decorative features built at a Humphrey Repton landscape at Brackendale Lodge in Norwich. In fact, they are the only features left of his landscape. And on the left is a resulting plan of the two features and the connecting holloway drawn up from taking several measurements along its length. And in various writings, Repton talks about a dressed pit. We had no idea what the dressed pit was, but by actually going and surveying the pit and how it connects the two features in the photos, we got a much better idea of where it was and what it would have looked like. But no sketch plans had to be this polished. This was for a book illustration, so I had to make it smart. But just a hand-drawn sketch would be fine. But they do form a really valuable record of this part of the landscape, which is now hidden in the woods behind Norfolk County Hall. Finally, double check that you have looked at all the garden features on your list and on the recording form before you leave. If you can carry out your survey in one day, that is best. But if the weather worsens or the site is very large and complex, then a second visit might be required. Take photos. Take photos of your garden or your park, lots and lots of photos. These will really help you as you write up your report. It's a good idea to put a number on your map to show where each photograph was taken, maybe with an arrow to remind you which direction the camera is facing. Once you've uploaded your pictures to your computer at home, remember to label them all, including the site name and the date. If we want to use any of these photos for anything other than the report, we will need to get permission from the site owner and from you, the photographer. So please also take pictures of yourselves as you do the site survey. This might seem a bit strange, but actually it's really important if you're happy for the Gardens Trust to use them. They are so useful to us in promoting projects like this, and it demonstrates to historic England the valuable work that you are doing. If you don't know what something is, for example, tree species, take a photo and either use a plant app to identify it or send it to the group on WhatsApp, and I'm sure somebody will be able to identify it. And I forgot to say last time, if you're a little uncertain about garden features, I do recommend this book as an alternative for looking everything up on Google or other search engines. This book by Michael Symes is a glossary of garden history. You can pick them up secondhand for about £1 in bookshops and in online, but that's a really good resource to have because it just helps you identify the difference between perhaps an arbor and a gazebo or a pergola, for example. You don't need to fill in every box on the form because some of the boxes might not be applicable. If you don't have a lake, you can't necessarily fill in the water features box. Any information you can add to the record is a bonus, and it will help others to understand and protect the site. As mentioned earlier, talk to the owner, gardener, manager, or any other regular visitors to the site because between them, they are likely to know quite a lot. And finally, when you've completed as much of your form as you can, you send them in to your county lead volunteer by the end of April. But if you want to send them in earlier, that's much appreciated. The lead volunteers will then forward them to Frankie and Tamsin. If you get stuck with anything during this process, you can email me or WhatsApp me in the first instance, or if you don't get a reply because I'm away or I'm on another project somewhere, then obviously ask Frankie or Tamsin for help. Now, you are generously giving up a lot of time as this project as volunteers, so you shouldn't be out of pocket because of it too. We have a bit of project budget to help you with travel expenses, but please can you lift share if at all possible, and to cover the cost of copying materials in archives. Green Future volunteers can request expensive claim forms from their lead County Gardens Trust contact, and we would rather that you didn't save up all your expenses until the end of the project. So can you just group them and then send them in fairly regularly? The lead County Gardens Trust volunteers will then save these up and send them off to Frankie at the Gardens Trust. Volunteers must also save any screenshots or photos of receipts for travel and other expenses such as photography permits. If there is something that's particularly expensive, such as a digital file of a beautiful painting, from a third party, then please can you run this past your County Gardens Trust lead volunteer first, or Frankie, before you go spending money on it. For the purposes of the forms, we just need photographs that you can take using screenshots or your own photographs. That's absolutely fine. So there is an exhibition planned towards the end of this project, which is why we would love to have great images of you carrying out your research and recording activities, as well as super pictures of historic documents, images, and interesting views of your landscapes. So this is a project timetable from now until the end of the project, really. You can see next week we've got our meetup at the Food Museum in Abbots Hall, which we're all looking forward to very much, and I know quite a few of you are coming. In October, we've arranged visits to the county archives, and I'm going on 5 of them. Frankie's going on 1 of them, so we look forward to meeting you there as well. And we'll look behind the scenes. We'll look at how items are stored and conserved. It gives you a really good idea, actually, of when you're ordering things from their catalogue as to what to look for and maybe how long you've got to wait or what kind of table you need, or whether you're going to see a copy rather than the original. Give you a good idea. They'll also go through how you use their catalogue, and perhaps they will hopefully lay out lots of items for us to see connected to your sites in your county that you're looking at. Sometime in October, we hope to have a webinar on how do we upload reports to heritage platforms. We might talk a bit more about significant statements of significance then. And then from now until April, it's the volunteers are researching and recording for the Green Futures project. We're going to record their sites and submit the forms, please, by the end of April at the latest. We hope to have during this time online and in-person meeting to share news and queries, so we can all get together with a coffee and have a look at all your exciting discoveries. Or if you've got a question and we don't know how to solve something, this will be a good time to chat with other people. And then after April, in May to October 26, we have hope to putting together a travel exhibition that's going to go around libraries in the counties. And there'll be an end of project webinar where we can look at our amazing finds and bits of history that you've discovered that no one else has found for the first time. And then at the end, there'll be an in-person volunteer celebration and party to say thank you to everybody who's been involved. So for now, all I can say is thank you very much for taking part in Green Futures. You are undertaking a really important role because there's a good chance that you may be the first people to actually research the sites that you're looking at. And we do look forward to hearing about your discoveries. But most of all, keep in touch, keep asking the questions if you need to, but most importantly, have fun. Okay, thank you. Frankie, back to you.
Thank you very much, Sally. I love ending on that note, which is have fun. That is the most important thing, because when you have fun, often the best work happens. So yes, lovely note to end on. Thanks, Sally. We've now got plenty of time for any questions, as today is a little bit shorter than last week. And I know we kind of rattled through the form there that you'll be filling in for when you record sites. So if you've got any questions about that, do pop them in the chat or ask us now. We've only had a couple of questions so far, one which was about Google Earth and whether we'll be teaching you how to use that properly on this project. The answer is we won't be teaching you how to use Google Earth, but you are able to look at satellite images on Google Maps. So if you Google Maps and go to a site that you want to look at, in the bottom left-hand corner, there'll be a little icon that says layers, and you can click on that and then click satellite imagery. And the quality of that imagery depends on where you are in the country and when that photo was last taken, and they're completely different everywhere. So you'll be able to see different levels of resolution depending on where you are. But do have a play around with that. It's a useful tool. And when you combine that with other types of maps that you're looking at, you can glean a lot of information from them. We had another question about when recording sites, do you ever also restore these beautiful ruins or gardens? Sally, do you want to
answer? Nothing I'd love more was get my trowel and do some mortaring or whatever, but no, we don't, as a trust, we just don't have the capacity. We don't have that kind of funding. Anybody who's been involved with restoring gardens knows that they eat up funding, pots of money. And so no, much as we would love to. But of course, if we've taken an interest and if you see I don't know, a building that's really looking sad and on its uppers, and you've waxed lyrical to the owner about how wonderful it is and it's special because you've not seen anything else like it, etc., etc. This could encourage them to make the necessary repairs. So, hopefully that we're taking an interest might enable other people and encourage other people to take an interest too.
Yeah, that's completely right. The first step, I guess, to conserving or preserving anywhere is to record it first of all and let other people know that it exists. So no,
Mm,
as much we're not going to do this on this project, um, but maybe in the future somebody will because of your
cool.
research. Um, we've also got another question, Sally, about the name of the book, The Glossary of Garden History. Could you just tell us
Oh
who the
yes,
author was again?
yes. So I'll turn it up. It's Michael Symes, a very eminent garden historian. And he wrote this in conjunction with the Garden History Society, which is a former version of the Gardens Trust pre 2015. But no, that's a very useful book to have on your shelf or to take out on site with you, actually. So just alphabetically, it lists everything, and there's lots of pictures in there. And also a bit of architectural details too, if you're not quite sure whether your temple's classical or Grecian or how you're going to describe it. So, but as I say, don't worry about it. Just take lots of pictures and share them with us, and we'll do what we can to help if you get completely stuck.
Yeah, that's it. We've got a good team of garden detectives here. Um, Another question we've got is, are there plans for this project to be extended to other areas of England and beyond? Possibly. Who knows? Um, we are offering this training obviously for free for anybody to come, regardless of where they're based, because the skills that you'll use on this project can be applied anywhere in the country. As to whether we'll run another project like this somewhere else, that depends on funding, and who would like to support us. I mean, that would be great if we could run this in the north or in the west. So stay tuned. Uh, we've got another kind of comment here from Shelby, I think relating to the first question, who says, I have a non-profit in restoring historical buildings. I'd love to help speak more about helping to restore these. That would be brilliant. Yes. Get in touch with us, Shelby. We'd love to talk more about that. A question here for Tamsin. Oh no, maybe for me.
Mhm.
As the pre-application stage of the Norwich to Tilbury project ends in August, how will the work doing in the relevant area help with this, please? So this is a question about timescales and whether people will see our kind of research in time. They should be able to still be able to use that research, even though that pre-application stage has ended, as far as we know. So that information that you're researching and recording will not only go onto these forms and go to us, but the next important step is to then upload your research onto the historic environment record, local lists, and anywhere else we can share it. When it's in that form, developers then can use it and are bound to consult it whenever they build or develop anywhere. When it comes to NSIPs and the precise thing that happens in each of these stages, as far as I know at the moment, but I think I need to go away and double check this, they should still be able to use that research that you're doing in various stages of the project going forward. But I will look at that Norwich to Tilbury one in a bit more detail and let you know if that isn't the case. I guess kind of regardless and thinking more broadly, outside of this project as well and outside of NSIPs, any research that you do in any area that we can add to the historic environment record will be useful for developments now and in the future. So if something ever changes, if developments don't go ahead or there's a new development that's happening here instead of here, hopefully all of the research that you've done will still be useful to somebody in the future, and will be there for long into the future. So it will not be wasted. So even if we don't get to catch the end of particular phases on this project, your research is still useful. And you're kind of almost in a sense doing rescue archaeology in that you're recording this information in these sites before they may be changed, altered. So your work won't be in vain. But I will look more into that for Norwich to Tilbury. Thanks, Fiona. Okay, I think that might be all the questions that we've got so far. Has anybody got any other questions before we wrap up today, or I run our poll? Maybe I'll run our poll now. If you've got any questions, do ask them in the chat. Otherwise, please, can you fill in this short poll to tell us about how you found today? And then I think we can wrap up. Can everyone see that poll? Yeah, brilliant.